Bhaktivedanta Yasodanandana Prajajanarandana Yasodanandana Prajajanarandana Prajajanarandana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Prajajanarandana Yasodanandana Prajajanarandana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajika Jaya Asto Tarasadashi Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapura Navadvip Dham Ki Shri Purushottam Chitra Ki Shri Ganga Mai Ki Jai Shri Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Maharani Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Smari Parijan Prabhupada Namane Namane Shvaraya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Smari Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurivani Pacharana Nivasesha Nivari Pasta Jati Satana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 9. What's the title of Canto 9? Liberation. Yes. And this is Chapter 7, the descendants of King Mandhata. And we're looking at text 7, but we'll probably read all of the verses to the end. Text 7 or text? Oh no, text 8. Oh, okay. No, we definitely will. Okay, let's read this and then we'll get going. Sonapatyo Vishanatma Naradasyo Padeshataha Varunam Sharanam Yataha Putro Me Jayatam Prabhu Sonapatyo Vishanatma Naradasyo Padeshataha Varunam Sharanam Yataha Putro Me Jayatam Prabhu Sonapatyo Vishanatma Naradasyo Padeshataha Varunam Sharanam Yataha Putro Me Jayatam Prabhu. Sonapatyo Vishanatma Naradasyo Padeshata Sharanam Sharanam Yattaha Putro Me Jayatam Prabhu. Sonapatyo Vishanatma Nanda Sharanam Sharanam Yataha Patro Me Jayatam Prabhu. Ladies? Sonapatyo Vishanatma Naradasyo Padeshataha Sharanam Sharanam Yataha Putro Me Jayatam Prabhu. Naradasyo Padeshataha Varanam Sharanam Yataha Putro Me Jayatam Prabhu. Saha. That Harishchandra Anapatyaha, being without a son, Vishana Atma, therefore very morose, Naradasya of Narada Upadeshataha by the advice Varunam unto Varuna Sharanam Yataha took shelter Putraha a son of me Jayatam let there be born Prabhu O my Lord. Harishchandra had no son and was therefore extremely morose. Once, therefore, following the advice of Narada, he took shelter of Varuna and said to him, My Lord, I have no son. Would you kindly give me one? Okay, so we're going to read on. I'm going to open up my iPad because it's bigger and easier for me to read. So what are we going to? 979. Yadi viro maharaja tenaiva tvam yaji iti tateti varune nasya putro jatas turohitaha. O King Parikshit, Harishchandra begged Varuna, My Lord, if a son is born to me, with that son I shall perform a sacrifice for your satisfaction. When Harishchandra said this, Varuna replied, Let it be so. Because of Varuna's benediction, Harishchandra begot a son named Rohita. Text 10. Jata sutta hinin anenanga mam yo yajesh veti so bravit yada pashu nidasa syad ata medyo bhavediti. Thereafter, when the child was born, Varuna approached Harishchandra and said, Now you have a son. With this son, you can offer me a sacrifice. In answer to this, Harishchandra said, after 10 days have passed since an animal's birth, the animal becomes fit to be sacrificed. Text 11. Nidashe cha sa'agatya yajeshvadyaha so bravit danta paso yajjayeran atamedyo bhavediti. After 10 days, Varuna came again and said to Harishchandra, Now you can perform the sacrifice. Harishchandra replied, When an animal grows teeth, then it becomes pure enough to be sacrificed. So what's going on here? What is happening? What do you think? What are you hearing? Harishchandra is delaying time. What is he delaying? Hands up if you think you know. What is he delaying? Sibya? Yeah. And who's to be sacrificed? Hands up if you think you know who's to be sacrificed. The son. What kind of an arrangement is that? you go to the demigods and ask for a son, and the demigod says, yes, I'll give you a son, but you have to sacrifice the son for me. What do you think about that? Is that surprising? Yeah, that's surprising, isn't it? Okay, let's continue on. This is interesting, isn't it? Dantajataya jasveti. He's talking about the teeth. Right? And so he's saying you can't sacrifice an animal without teeth. Which is very interesting. Sa pratyahata so bravit yada pantyasya danta ata medyo bhavediti. When the teeth grew, Varuna came and said to Harishchandra, now the animal has grown teeth. I mean, and this is his son, by the way. But I guess, there's not a lot of difference between humans and animals, right? The human is a dvipada pasu, a two-legged animal. Now the animal has grown teeth and you can perform the sacrifice. Harishchandra replied, when all of its teeth have fallen out, it will be fit for sacrifice. That's interesting. Text 13. Pasho nipatita danta yajeshvetyaha sobravit yada paso punardanta jayante ta pashu suchahi. When the teeth have fallen out, Varuna returned and said to Harishchandra, now the animal's teeth have fallen out and you can perform the sacrifice. But Harishchandra replied, when the animal's teeth grow in again, then he will be pure enough to be sacrificed. Okay, because he's a child, teeth fallen out, they have to grow back again. Not grown up, in other words. Punajata yajasveti sa pratyahata sao bravit sanahiko yada rajan rajanyota pashu suchihi. When the teeth grew in again, Varuna came and said to Harishchandra, now you can perform the sacrifice. But Harishchandra then said, O king, when the sacrificial animal becomes a Kshatriya and is able to shield himself to fight with the enemy, then he will be purified. What's Harishchandra doing? Huh? What's he doing? He's what? Excuses. Yeah, he's giving excuses. Very expert at giving excuses, huh? We're all expert at giving excuses, actually. Ite putra nuragena snehayantrita cetasa kalam vanchayata tam tam ukto devas tamaikshata. Harishchandra was certainly very much attached to his son. Because of this affection, he asked the demigod Varuna to wait. Thus Varuna waited and waited for the time to come. Rohitas tad abhigyaya pitu karma chikirshitam prana prepsu danaspanir aranyam pratyapadyata. Rohita could understand that his father intended to offer him as the animal for sacrifice. Therefore, just to save himself from death, he equipped himself with bow and arrows and went to the forest. How would you feel if you discovered that your father was going to sacrifice you? Well, what did he do? He left home. Isn't it unusual? If your parents don't appreciate you, then you leave home. Or depending on how much attachment there is. Text 17. Pitaram varunagrastam shrutva jata mahodaram rohito gramameyaya tamindra pratyashedata. When Rohita heard that his father had been attacked by dropsy due to Varuna, and that his abdomen had grown very large, he wanted to return to the capital, but King Indra forbade him to do so. Now what's happening? According to this verse, what's happening? Do you know what dropsy is? Don't know what dropsy is. Okay. Somebody want to ask Google, Dave? What's dropsy? No, hang on. I will ask. Perplexity. Yeah, it's a disease of. Dropsy is an old-fashioned term for what is now medically known as edema, right? Which is an accumulation of fluid in the body, which refers to the abnormal accumulation of fluid in the body's tissues leading to swelling, right? So who's Varuna the demigod of? Water, effectively, the ocean, yeah. And so it appears here that Varuna's cursed, what's his name? Harishchandra, right? Harishchandra's been cursed. Why? Why was Harishchandra cursed by Varuna? He didn't fulfill his promise. Although it's a little hard for us to conceive here of why would Harishchandra agree to the condition of when having his desire to have a son fulfilled, he would then have to sacrifice him to Varuna. That's an interesting question, isn't it? Why would you agree to that? But and it's very interesting, we see this as a theme within the Bhagavatam, that often there is a disturbance in the mind of a king who can't have a successor, right? Right? Often the king doesn't have a successor, and that's deeply disturbing to the kings. Right? Deeply disturbing to the kings. Even they may have many daughters, right? But still they want a son. And we understand that it's a patriarchal system. So the king has to hand over the kingdom in order to do his duty properly. We might think, why is he so attached to having a son? Right? But in order for him to do his duty properly, he needs to hand over the kingdom to a son. So it's not entirely, just attached to having a son. It's all to do with the duties and responsibilities of a Kshatriya. So it's not that he's just egoistic and wants to have a son from egoistic motivations. There may be some of that, obviously. But To help us understand the context, we need to understand that the king's duty is to protect the citizens. Right? It's a sacred duty. It's a service to humanity. And that impels that dedication, if you like, to service is a key feature that motivates almost everybody. Right? And especially in Vedic, in this culture we see. No son, oh no, it's the end of the creation, right? And so much so, Harishchandra has agreed to Varuna that when he gets a son, oh great, got a son, I'll sacrifice him when he's born. Huh? That's very interesting, isn't it? It's like, why would he do that? But then we see in Krishna's pastimes, what's his name? What's Krishna's father's name? Not Nanda Maharaj. Vasudeva, yeah. I got an image in my mind, but I can't think of his name. This is old age. Vasudeva and Devaki. Vasudeva does something similar. Right? He agrees that he'll hand over, because Kamsa is concerned, right? What's Kamsa concerned about? That is the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, there was a voice came, right? Have any of you heard voices coming from the clouds? Huh? Hands up if you've heard voices coming from the clouds. Nobody. Okay. This is why we can understand that in previous times, in previous ages, things were very different. And this is very mystical and esoteric, these stories, right? But there was such an ominous pronouncement from a voice that appeared to have no physical form. And it was accepted by everybody. And so Kamsa was concerned. So what did Vasudeva do? He said, okay, I'll deliver my children to you. Right? And we know the story. Kamsa killed them. But Vasudeva was thinking, we'll work that out later on. Right? Effectively. So here we've got a interestingly similar situation where Harishchandra had a son. What was his name? Rohita, right? But in order to get the son, he promised that he would give him back to Varuna for sacrifice. That's rather bewildering, isn't it? Why would Varuna do that? And now Varuna's chasing, well, not chasing, but he's calling in what's owed to him. Harishchandra hasn't fulfilled his promise, right? And so what's happened? Back to this verse. What's happened? Hands up if you can remember what happened to Harishchandra. Hands up. Hands up. What with? Huh? The disease. What was the disease? Dropsy. Or we looked it up, edema, which means accumulation of fluid within the body. It can kill you. Right? It can kill you. He wanted to return to his capital because he was in the forest, wasn't he? Yeah. So he's trying to pursue his duty, right? This is a very common theme. But Indra's on the scene. It gets more complicated. He forbade him to do so. Let's read on, shall we? Bhume Pariyatanam Punyam Teta Chetra Nishevanai Rohitaya Tishat Chakraha Sopyaranye Vasat Samam. King Indra advised Rohita to travel to different pilgrimage sites and holy places. For such activities are pious indeed. Following this instruction, Rohita went to the forest for 1 year. Evam dvitiye tritiye chatute panchame tata. This is counting, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Dvitiye tritiye chatute panchame tata. Abhyetya Staviro vipro bhutvaha vritraha. In this way, at the end of the 2nd, 4th and 5th years, when Rohita wanted to return to his capital, the king of heaven, Indra approached him as an old brahmana and forbade him to return, repeating the same words as in the previous year. So what does it look like? It looks like not only is Varuna concerned about protecting Rohita, but also Indra, the king of the demigods. Let's read on. Shashtam samvatsaram tatra charitva Rohita purim upavrajyan ajigartad akrinan madhyamam sutam sunashepam pasum pitre pradaya samavandata. And this verse has a purport, but a very short purport. Thereafter, in the 6th year, after wandering in the forest, Rohita returned to the capital of his father. He purchased from Ajigarta his second son named Sunasepa. Then he offered Sunasepa to his father, Harishchandra, to be used as the sacrificial animal and offered Harishchandra his respectful obeisances. Purport. Which is a very interesting purport. It appears that in those days a man could be purchased for any purpose. Harishchandra was in need of a person to sacrifice as the animal in a yajna and thus fulfill his promise to Varuna. And a man was purchased from another man for this purpose. Millions of years ago, animal sacrifice and slave trade both existed. Indeed, they've existed since time immemorial. Well, there's a few questions that arise as a result of this verse, right? Why is Ajigarta selling his second son. Does that question come to mind? It does for me. I just saw in the headlines on yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before? Somebody in China, was it China? Well, wherever it was, could be anywhere, was given a life sentence for selling their child. Right? Selling their child. Be hard for us to appreciate the circumstances within which a mother or a father would sell their children. Right? Hands up, all the parents here. Hands up if you're a parent. Could you imagine selling your child? Might be occasions when you might think about it. Eh? Could be an option, especially if you've got a high price. It's inconceivable, isn't it, really, when you think about it? Children can be annoying, but selling them? And not only that, selling them knowing that they're going to be sacrificed. Huh? So how must, well, we can appreciate perhaps why Harishchandra promised to sacrifice his son. Right? We could appreciate the circumstance. Hard to conceive of, but we could appreciate. But then, having agreed that he would sacrifice the child, he then has gone to great lengths to protect him. But just on the principle of getting a son. But of course, within the context of the culture, that the son is essential for one to perform one's duty. Right? So, Ajigarta has got 2 sons, and he's prepared to sell one of them. Sell one of them. And so Prabhupada says in the purport, in those days, you could purchase a man for any purpose. Right? Now, we're all somebody's children, right? Is that right? Somebody's child. How would you feel if your parents sold you? Especially for sacrifice. Might be some feeling of abandonment, right? Let down. So usually this would probably be, these are extreme circumstances, and we don't know the circumstance behind Ajigarta selling his second son. We don't know the circumstances there, but Prabhupada makes the interesting comment. And we've seen it in recent history. Slavery was an accepted and common stance, right? Not in our time, but certainly not so many years ago. This is why this is one of the precipitants for the Civil War in America, right? But it's interesting. Prabhupada says millions, because these are events that took place millions of years ago according to the chronology of the Bhagavatam, right? And so Prabhupada's merely making the point here, not necessarily that Prabhupada's condoning any of these things, because we now know that selling children will put you in jail. So sometimes we read of things in the Bhagavatam and we think, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Well, I think for now, don't think of any of these things as good ideas, even if it appears in the Bhagavatam, right? Because culture's changed. Time has changed. There was another article I saw recently, and it was about having human zoos, and this is chronicled. This is recorded in history, not made up. But in Europe and in England and also North America, the circus owners, right? Have you noticed there's a circus coming to town soon? They've got their billboards around, and everybody wants to go and have a look at the spectacle, right? There's a spectacle. So they had travelling displays of Aboriginal people and people from Africa, right? And they would set up an environment that looked like Australia or Africa or whatever, and then they would put the Aboriginal people, black people, this is whites looking at blacks, by the way, as a spectacle, and people would pay money to come and have a look at the Aboriginals, right? So this is not so long ago, this is only a few hundred years ago, right? What do you think about that? We pay money to go to the zoo to look at the Aboriginals in cages and go, ooh, look at them. In other words, they're just like animals, right? The value of the human being is the same as an animal. And we can see, in this day and age, we see it. Of course, to us, eating animals is atrocious, right? Animal sacrifice is, what to speak of human sacrifice, animal sacrifice to us is challenging, very challenging, right? But we still see in modern society, it's acceptable. Right? At least putting human beings in cages and having people pay money to look at them is not acceptable. Right? So it's interesting, isn't it, how social mores, right, norms, change over time. And Prabhupada's making a point here. Millions of years ago, purchasing a human being for any purpose was possible. They're just like an animal. And animal sacrifice, and we're seeing here even human sacrifice, and we see in the pages of the Bhagavatam stories of humans being sacrificed, which is just so challenging for us, right? But Prabhupada's making a point. This was acceptable millions of years ago. Not condoning it necessarily, but just an observation, right? And of course, in Vaishnava culture, sacrifice of humans and animals is what? What is it? Huh? Bad. Yeah, we don't do either. Huh? Yet we see it in the pages of the Bhagavatam. We accept it. Oh, an animal sacrifice. Oh, that's no problem. Right? Human sacrifice. Ooh, that's going a bit far. Right? Okay, so Text 21. Tata Purusha Medhena Harishchandro Mahayashaha Muktadaro Yajadevan Varunadin Mahatkataha. Thereafter, the famous king Harishchandra, one of the exalted persons in history, performed grand sacrifices by sacrificing a man and pleased all the demigods. In this way, his dropsy created by Varuna was cured. So that's very interesting, isn't it? That's very interesting. He fulfilled his desire to have a son, right? And so therefore he's able to fulfill his duties as a king. Huh? And he also satisfied Varuna by sacrificing, what was his name? His name is mentioned here too. Sunakshefam. Sunakshefa. Huh? And in this way, the curse that he got from Varuna was also lifted. Text 22. Vishvamitro bhavat tasmin hotachad varyuratmavan jamantagnira budbrahma vasishto yasya samgaha. In that great human sacrifice, Vishvamitra was the chief priest to offer oblations. The perfectly self-realized Jamadagni had the responsibility for chanting the mantras from the Yajur Veda. Vasishta was the chief brahminical priest, and the sage Ayasya was the reciter of the hymns of the Sama Veda. You know, when we do an initiation, which is our most commonly performed yajna, then we have different devotees in different parts of the room reading from the various hymns of the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam, our kind of Veda, if you like, right? So the sacrifice of, what was his name again? Got to get the name right. Sunakshefar was done in very auspicious circumstances with great saintly persons present. Text 23. Tasmai tushto dadavindraha sata kumbam mayam ratam sunakshefasya mahatmyam uparishtat prachakshate. King Indra, being very pleased with Harishchandra, offered him a gift of a golden chariot. Sunakshefa's glories will be presented along with the description of the son of Vishvamitra. So he sacrificed. Ostensibly, I guess, for the betterment of the whole of society. Like we see in the story of in the story of Vritrasura, how the demigods approached, what was his name? Dadichi. And they asked Dadichi for his bones because from his bones they could fashion a weapon that could kill Vritrasura, wasn't it? And Dadichi agreed to it. This is inconceivable, isn't it? For the welfare of everybody, Dadichi was prepared to give up his body, life, and give a gift of his bones to the demigods. This is. Anybody here happy to give up for the service of Radha Ballabha? Would you agree to giving up your life so we could use your bones? Savior Bhagavat. Very surrendered. This is inconceivable for us. But interesting, Prabhupada doesn't make much comment about it, but at least we're exploring it a little bit just to understand what's going on. The great sage Vishvamitra, did I read this next one? Satyam Sharam Dritim Drishtva Sabharyasya Chabupate Vishvamitro Brisham Prito Tadava Vihatam Gatim. The great sage Vishvamitra saw that Maharaj Harishchandra, along with his wife, was truthful, forbearing, and concerned with the essence. Here, this is very interesting if you look at the word for word here. Satyam, truthfulness. Saram, firmness. Dritim, forbearance. Right? And then the translation, it says, Vishvamitra saw that Harishchandra was, along with his wife, truthful. Right, so what's that? What's the word, the Sanskrit word for truthful in the word for word? Satyam, yes. Forbearing. So what's forbearing? Dritim, right. And then in the translation it says here, concerned with the essence, yet in the word for word it says firmness. Saram, right. Interesting, firmness. How do we resolve that? Firmness and concerned with the essence. Anybody like to speculate? What's the relationship between firmness and concerned with the essence? How do we understand that? Firm, no, that's dritim. Saram, firmness. Very interesting, isn't it? How many of you go shopping for fruit? How do you tell whether something is ripe or not? What's one way? There's more than one way to do this. How do you do it? You test its firmness. Right? If it's rock hard, what do? Right? If you're buying maybe a mango or other fruit, how about an avocado? Right? An avocado. Or a tomato even. Right? What do they say? Tomato is a fruit, but don't put it in a fruit salad. So firmness, feel it. Huh? And then you'll know the essence of the fruit by just feeling it. So it's interesting, isn't it? Firmness and concerned with the essence, sara. And this is, of course, a quality of a devotee also. How do we test the essence of somebody or something? Right? We don't walk around squeezing people. But we observe their characteristics. Right? We look, and sometimes, we don't necessarily accept things on face value, right? Which is the quality here of Harishchandra. We have to look deeply into the essence of a person's character. Just because somebody walks around like he's a king and he looks like he owns the place, right? I'm in charge around here. May not be the case, right? What's being demonstrated on the outside is not necessarily an indication of what's going on in the inside. So it's interesting, isn't it, that Vishwamitra appreciated the characteristics and qualities of Maharaj Harishchandra because he was able to understand the essence of everything, right? And so that word, interesting, saram, and the translation, firmness. So, as a result of Vishwamitra being impressed with the qualities of Harishchandra, he gave him avihatam gatim, right? Which is interesting because what does avihatam mean, Gopa? Avihatam. Gatim means destination, right? So what does avihatam mean? I'll tell you, it's verse 9:7-24. Dadal avihatim gatim. He gave him, here is translated as imperishable knowledge, but avihatam, hatam means that which can be destroyed, is it? Killed. Right? Avihatam, that which can't be, which is imperishable, right? That's what avihatam means. And gatim is location or destination, but here translated as knowledge. Interesting, huh? Imperishable knowledge. So, very interesting. Harishchandra is a unique person here. Very unique. Even if he sacrificed his son, which he didn't do, actually. He sacrificed somebody else's son, which is, of course, inconceivable to us. But we have to, we are not seeing the full picture in all of this, necessarily, right? And Harishchandra is so elevated, practically speaking, that Vishwamitra gives him transcendental knowledge. Right? So obviously there's a little bit more to this story than meets the eyes. We're only getting a gloss. Right? There's much more going on here that we're not privy to. Now here's an interesting set of verses which says purport, but I'll read that when we get to it. Maharaj Harishchandra first purified, and here's an indication of the elevated nature and character of Harishchandra. Maharaj Harishchandra first purified his mind, which was full of material enjoyment. Right? He's a king, the emperor. And how did he do this? By amalgamating it with the earth. This is his mind. Then he amalgamated the earth with water, the water with fire, the fire with air, and the air with the sky. Thereafter, he amalgamated the sky with the total material energy. And the total material energy was spiritual knowledge. Right? So this is understanding of the Brahman. Everything is ultimate. Everything within the creation is ultimately Brahman. Although there are various transformations of that energy so that we get all of the variety of the material world, just in material elements. And what's that spiritual knowledge? This spiritual knowledge is realization of oneself as part of the Supreme Lord. Krishna confirms that in the Bhagavad Gita. Mama evamsa jiva loke. Right? Jiva bhuta sanatanaha. The spiritual knowledge is realization of oneself as part of the Supreme Lord. When the self-realized spiritual soul is engaged in service to the Lord, he is eternally imperceptible and inconceivable. Thus established in spiritual knowledge, he is completely freed from material bondage. Right? And then here it says purport. Right? Have you got it on yours? You're reading? Purport. Right? And have a guess what the purport says. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 9th canto, 7th chapter of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, entitled The Descendants of King Mandata. So I think we can finish here. Isn't that amazing? So tomorrow, is that okay, Gopa? I think we've got to the next chapter. A lot of no purports there, but still we explored it a little bit and had a look at some of the interesting characteristics of the story, as observed at least by me anyway. So please forgive me if I've said anything inappropriate. But I think it was okay. Everybody's smiling. There's nobody frowning. And that's the purpose. The purpose of the Bhagavatam ultimately is to uplift us. Right? This is what the purpose of the Bhagavatam is. Although, in the circumstance, it's a bit hard to work out what's going on, because we're hearing of animal sacrifices and we're hearing of sacrifices of human beings. Right? Which to us is abhorrent. Not only that, if you were doing such things, you were caught by today's authorities, you'd be punished, severely punished, right, for activities which, at least in the Bhagavatam, appear to have been normal, or shall we not say normal? What is it? Acceptable. Right? Well, okay. Anybody have any comments or questions or thoughts, realizations? You've got the microphone now, Kati. You have to say something. They've given it to you.
I need your blessings, Prabhu, I can say that.
Are you prepared to be a sacrifice?
Yeah. I should become a nice devotee like you, Prabhu. Give that blessings.
A devotee like me?
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that's actually a good idea or not, but anyway. Isn't it interesting, actually, how yajna and sacrifice is an integral part of Vedic culture, of any culture, right? And we know that Harishchandra, as a king, was prepared to sacrifice his life for the benefit of the citizens, like Dadichi. And even we as devotees like to sacrifice our lives for Krishna's pleasure, or even for the pleasure of the devotees, right? It's not that, we're putting people, we're performing yajnas with human sacrifices, right? That gets very sensational headlines in the newspapers, right? Human sacrifice at Hare Krishna temple. Right? But in one sense, yes, we are. That mood, when we go, swaha, right? Swaha. What are we saying? Huh? It's an offering. I'm offering, and we're offering ourselves ultimately into the sacrificial fire. And in fact, the sacrifice is purifying. Right? But what's our sacrifice? Broadly, or no, not broadly, specifically, what's our sacrifice? Anybody got an idea? Raise your hands if you've got an idea of what our sacrifice is. I said, raise your hands. If you've got an idea, we'll come to you. Put your hand up. He's a professor, so he gets other people to put their hands up. Yeah, we got one here. You got your hand up?
Like Sankirtan Yajna?
Sankirtan, yes. Sankirtan. What was your... Same. And he's here... What did you say, Brajraj? What did you say? Mind. What else? Thoughts. Intelligence. But it all goes into the Sankirtan Yajna. Right? It's all a sacrifice. So the culture and the the culture of sacrifice permeates the whole of Vedic culture. Right? That you give up something, or if not everything, for the benefit of others. And that ultimately the benefit will come back to you, right? What's in this room, what's a very common feature of, we can call it Vedic culture, but any culture that that illustrates that sacrifice? What is it? What do we see in this room? And it starts with a H or a D. What is it? Over there. Huh? Yes, related to the deities, but the Hindi word, it starts with a H. Do you get it? Hundi. Or D, donation box. Right? But a sacrifice. Right? And whenever, if you came to the temple and you didn't put at least a dollar in the donation box, you'd feel bad. Right? Or if you didn't put anything in the donation box, you might not feel bad because you did some service or did something else for Krishna. Right? So interesting how this, if we look at the stories of the Bhagavatam from the point of view of the sacrificial intent, right? The intent of the sacrifice, which sometimes can't be observed by the external activities, the external behavior. Why looking at the sara, or the essence of a person's character, is so important. Right? And what do we see? What do we see in the essence of the great devotees? What do we see? Hands up if you think you know the answer. What do we see in their character? What do we see in Prabhupada's character? What did he do? Sacrifice. Yeah, of course. It's such an obvious question with such an obvious answer. Sacrifice. Jagya. So what did Prabhupada sacrifice? His whole life to Sankirtan. Yeah. So, yeah. The Hare Krishnas are into human sacrifice. Right? Just like what Krishna's fourth chapter, Dharma samstapanataya. What's the first line? He protects the devotees and kills the demons. Right? What's the Sanskrit for that? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha duskritam. Yes, right? So we see, Krishna likes a bit of sacrifice. Right? We see at the beginning of the 10th canto of the Vrindavan pastimes, Krishna's slaughtering demons left, right and centre. Right? And he's applauded for that. Right? Even Lord Nrsingadev is applauded for what? Tearing Hiranyakashipu apart. Right? So, you know, from an external point of view, horrific. Right? Horrifying. But because we're looking at the essence, we're looking at the sara, right? Or the firmness, the ripeness, if you like. That's really what firmness is. Right? In Bengal, don't they say paka and kacha? Is that right? Paka means ripe, as I understand it, and kacha means unripe. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Kantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Hare Krishna.
Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Bhagom Hikamaniya Vishesha Shobha
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Andani Yasa Sakale Priya Priti Manti Vasyanti Bhakti Kayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurum